This happened a few months ago. I was 32 and working the night shift as a nurse at St. James Hospital. I'd put in many hours there and thought I was experienced, but sometimes the long nights were very tiring. The hospital was old, and the dim lights flickered often. I was used to the echoing hallways and the routine of checking on patients. I was there to support my family and pay off my student loans. I've never stopped thinking about the strange things that happened during those shifts. On my third night shift, something odd caught my attention. I was walking down the quiet corridor when I heard a soft humming coming from room 213. I thought it was just a patient's device, so I decided to check it out. I opened the door and the room was empty. I looked around but found nothing. No humming, no buzzing. I shrugged it off, thinking I was overthinking things. But that uneasy feeling stayed with me. The days went on and more unsettling events followed. I heard unseen footsteps echoing down the hall during late hours. They felt too close, like they were right behind me. My heart raced each time I turned to look, but I pushed it away. Perhaps I was just tired. Then the whispers started. I could hear my name softly called, but when I turned around there was nobody. My skin prickled. I knew I was alone. One night, the power went out. The darkness was so unsettling. I felt my way along the wall, heart pounding. That's when I first saw her, a patient who shouldn't have been there. She sat on a bed in room 307, staring at me with wide eyes. I walked closer, wanting to see if she was okay. But when I got near, she vanished. Just gone. I blinked and tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light. These occurrences built on each other, and I felt like I was losing grip on reality. I wondered if I was just exhausted. Maybe my mind was inventing these figures and sounds to cope with stress. But that mysterious patient kept showing up when I was alone. I started to watch closely, hoping for something more real. Then one night, I saw her again. This time she looked right at me as if she wanted to say something. I stepped forward to help her, but she faded away into thin air like she was never there. Panic flooded through me. I turned to run, but a voice called my name from the shadows. I froze. Clara! I felt cold chills crawl up my spine. I was terrified. Was I truly alone in this hospital? I thought about all those whispers and those footsteps. Were they a product of my tired mind, or was something watching me? I took a deep breath, but the air felt heavy. I knew I had to check the empty rooms again. My eyes darted down the dark hallway. I felt like something was waiting. What was happening? I didn't want to stay, but I couldn't leave. I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't understand. And as I turned to head back, I heard the humming again, echoing through the halls. It seemed to be coming from everywhere. As I stood there, frozen in the dark corridor, the humming persisted. It felt alive, wrapping around me like a cold blanket. My instincts screamed to run, but an overwhelming urge compelled me to follow the sound. I didn't know why. Maybe it was curiosity or an inexplicable call to confront whatever this was. I moved cautiously, step by step, my heart pounding harder with each echoing note. The humming led me toward the nurse's station. The desk was cluttered with charts and abandoned coffee cups. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast unsettling shadows. I hesitated, glancing around to ensure I was alone. That's when I noticed something peculiar. One of the charts lay open on the desk. It was a file for a patient named Lily Baker. The date was marked as 6 months prior, but the details were strange. The report noted that she had passed away. A shiver traveled down my spine. Why was this chart here, and why was it open? I picked it up, gripping the paper tightly, the edges turning white under my fingers. Just then, I heard the humming grow louder, echoing off the walls. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I felt a draft brush past me, and I turned to see room 213, the one I had passed earlier, its door slightly ajar. I didn't remember leaving it open. My pulse quickened, torn between the urge to investigate or flee. My instincts screamed at me to back away, but I felt tethered to that door, pulled in by what I couldn't explain. I stepped closer, peering into the room. The humming came to an abrupt halt. Inside, the lights flickered like a faulty bulb. I tried to see in, but the room felt darker than the others. I held my breath and pushed the door open, stepping inside. The space was just as I remembered, only this time the bedside chair was occupied. There she was, the same young woman with wide eyes staring blankly at me. I felt a rush of terror. "Lily?" I breathed, the name escaping my lips before I could stop it. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I took a hesitant step forward. "Are you okay? Can I help you?" My voice trembled, the words feeling hollow in the unsettling silence. But instead of answering, she pointed to the corner of the room. I followed her gesture, my breath quickening. That's when I saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man dressed in an old-fashioned suit, face obscured. He stood perfectly still, staring at Lily. My heart raced. What was he doing here? I moved back toward the door, panic bubbling inside me. Suddenly the lights flickered violently before plunging the room into darkness. I gasped, my pulse racing. I turned to escape but felt something tug at my sleeve. I looked down, and Lily was standing right beside me, a desperate look on her face, her lips forming the words, "Help me." In that moment, everything changed. I knew I had to find out the truth, whatever it took. I felt the cold air prickling my skin, and fear turned my insides to ice. "Help you?" I repeated, my voice barely more than a whisper. I couldn't understand what was happening. Lily took a step back, her eyes filled with urgency, almost pleading. She glanced toward the man in the corner. Panic surged in my chest. Who was he? What did he want? And more importantly, why was Lily still here? I took a deeper breath and tried to steady myself. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. Her gaze shifted between me and the man as if the answer was somewhere between us, just out of reach. Then, without warning, the lights flickered back on. The man was closer now, his face still hidden in shadow. But I could see the outline of his dark coat and the glint of something metallic in his hand. My heart raced. I was stuck, trapped in this room with a ghost and an ominous stranger. "Lily!" I urged, my voice rising with desperation. "What do you need?" But she didn't respond. Instead, she turned to the window where the moonlight spilled into the room, illuminating her ghostly figure. I followed her gaze and froze. Outside, I saw movement, flashes of white in the distance. It looked like children playing in the field behind the hospital. I shivered. It was impossible. The report said the area had been empty for years. Lily's eyes widened, as if she sensed my realization. She pointed toward the window again, but this time her face morphed into fear, a silent scream. The man took one step forward, and suddenly, my instincts kicked in. I yanked open the door and bolted down the corridor, not daring to look back. I could feel the weight of the air behind me, as if something was chasing me, clawing at my back. I didn't stop until I reached the nurse's station again, panting and shaken. I banged my palms on the desk, scattering charts. "What is going on?" I shouted at the empty room. The humming began once more, low and rhythmic, but now it was tinged with something else, anger, awareness. I felt dizzy, grappling with the need to understand but also to escape. My gaze landed on a nearby bulletin board plastered with old photographs. Several showed groups of nurses and patients all smiling. I leaned in, instinctively searching for familiarity amidst the chaos. That's when I spotted a hauntingly familiar face, a woman identical to Lily, standing between two doctors. The date on the photo was marked years back. Why didn't I see this before? I murmured to myself. Then it hit me. The timeline. Lily had been a patient here before she died, but what did that have to do with the figure in the room? And why were children outside when they shouldn't be? I straightened up, my mind racing. The answers were hidden somewhere in this hospital, and I needed to find them. I turned back to the hallway, determination flooding through me. There had to be more to uncover. As I looked back down the corridor, a shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. I squinted, heart racing, and froze. Someone was watching me from the far end. I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I took a shaky breath and steeled myself. I couldn't just stand here paralyzed. I needed to know who was watching me. I crept forward, the floor creaking softly under my weight. The corridor was silent. only the soft hum of the hospital lights above me breaking the stillness. I followed the shadow, heart pounding, each step echoing louder than the last. As I moved closer, the figure became clearer, a small child standing alone, staring directly at me. "What are you doing here?" I whispered, half expecting the child to vanish like Lily. Instead, he just blinked, his eyes wide and innocent. But there was something unsettling about the way he held himself. He looked like he belonged to another time, dressed in a tattered shirt and shorts as if he had wandered here from an old photograph. "I'm playing," he said softly, his voice airy. He pointed behind him, down the hallway. "They're waiting for you." "Who?" I asked, glancing over my shoulder instinctively. The air felt charged, thick with unspoken words, and I wondered if I should turn back or keep pressing forward. The boy didn't answer. He just stared at me, unblinking, and my gut twisted. I had seen enough horror films to know that children like this often meant trouble. "Where are your parents?" I ventured, feeling foolish at the question. I was pretty sure a child alone in a hospital at this hour was pretty wrong. His face fell slightly, a flash of something dark crossing his features. "They can't come," he murmured, pulling at the hem of his shirt. "You have to help them." Panic rose within me. "Help who? You're not supposed to be here," I shot back, fear cracking my voice. Just then, the lights blipped again. I felt the familiar stirrings of dread return. With a quick glance back, I saw the flicker of movement again. This time, it wasn't the man in the corner. I could see Lily hovering behind the boy, her expression even graver than before. "Get away from him," she suddenly cried, the urgency in her voice leaping into my chest like a cold hand gripping my heart. The boy turned to look at her, and in that moment I realized something was deeply wrong. "But I can't leave," he said, his voice barely a whisper now. "They won't let me." He glanced around, paranoia weaving into his innocent facade. Something broke inside me. I felt my resolve slipping. I couldn't take this. "You need to go back, all of you," I shouted into the darkness, desperation clawing at me. Lily's eyes filled with sorrow. "You have to find the truth, or they will never be free," she beseeched, reaching toward me as if she could grasp the weight of the situation better than I could. Then, without warning, the ground shook beneath my feet. The lights flickered violently, and the corridor stretched on forever, warping and twisting like it was alive. I could hear a chorus of whispers, some comforting and some frightening, blending into a haunting melody that felt all too familiar. And then everything went dark. I tried to shout, but my voice was gone. I was lost in the depths of terror, and I knew this night was far from over. I stumbled through the darkness, disoriented. A chill gripped me as I realized I was no longer in the corridor. Instead, I stood in a dimly lit room, the faint outline of medical equipment surrounding me. The smell of antiseptic was overwhelming, but mixed with something sweet and decayed. My heart raced as I tried to process what was happening. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling in the silence. No answer came, just the dead air and the persistent hum of machines. I took a cautious step forward, the floor beneath me cold and unwelcoming. That's when I noticed a flickering light in the corner. I moved toward it, heart thumping in my chest. The light emanated from an old television, static crackling across the screen. My reflection stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed. Suddenly, a figure appeared next to me, materializing out of the shadows. I jumped, nearly colliding with a chart hanging on the wall. It was just the boy from earlier, standing beside me with a pleading expression. "They're waiting," he repeated, his voice echoing eerily in the void. "You must hurry." Before I could respond, he pointed toward the static screen. I squinted at it, trying to make sense of the shifting patterns. Then, something shifted in the static. I leaned in closer, heart pounding as shapes began to form. Faces flashed across the screen, their mouths moving, but no sound coming out. "Help us," one of the figures mouthed, a woman with sunken eyes and tangled hair. My breath caught in my throat. "Who are they?" I gasped, stepping back instinctively. I could feel the boy's small hand gripping my wrist, urging me closer again. "They're trapped," he said, squeezing my wrist tighter. "Just like me." Panic surged inside me. What do you mean, trapped? How can I help? I asked, my voice rising with fear. But the boy's attention shifted, and suddenly he looked over my shoulder, eyes wide with terror. They're coming! I spun around, adrenaline rushing through my veins. The shadows grew heavier, dark shapes creeping toward me from all angles. I could hear faint whispers merging into a chorus of anxious voices, all overlapping, asking for release, begging to be heard. Desperation fueled me. I pushed against the fear clawing at my throat and glanced back at the screen. The faces were now distorted, wailing silently as the shadows closed in. In that moment, I understood. They needed me to uncover their stories, to bring their truths to light. In a burst of resolve, I turned back to the boy. "What do I need to do?" I demanded fiercely. He looked up at me, and for an instant the weight of countless memories fell upon his small shoulders. "Find the records," he replied, voice firm. "The truth is written down. If you find it, you can set us free." Before I could ask anything else, the darkness swallowed him whole. The shadows surged forward, threatening to engulf me as well. I had no choice. "Where are the records?" I yelled into the void, feeling my surroundings begin to collapse. That was when I saw it. A light in another room, the emergency exit sign glowing dimly. I dashed toward it, frantically pushing through the waves of fear closing in around me. Just as I reached the door, I could have sworn I heard a voice whisper in my ear, "You need to hurry before it's too late." I gasped, my heart racing with urgency. Whatever I was about to uncover could change everything, or cost me everything. But I had no choice. I flung open the door and stepped into the unknown. The blinding light from the emergency exit sign flooded the small room as I stumbled through the door. I shielded my eyes for a moment, the brightness jarring against the darkness I had just escaped. Once I adjusted, I found myself in a narrow hallway. The walls were lined with faded posters featuring smiling medical staff. My stomach churned at the sight. Everything felt so unnerving. I took a few hesitant steps down the corridor, my breath catching in my throat. It felt eerie, almost like the air was watching me. Shadows danced in the corners, but I refused to give in to the creeping dread. I had a purpose now, to find the records. I hurried along, the click of my shoes echoing off the stark tiles. The fluorescent lights flickered above, now bursting into full life, illuminating hospital doors on either side of me. I pushed past a couple of closed doors, unsure where the records might be kept. I needed answers, and quickly. As I turned a corner, I saw another TV, a dusty old model sitting in a waiting area, the screen fuzzy and barely functional. I stopped and caught a glimpse of my reflection before the static changed once again. My heart dropped as the faces flickered back to life, but now they looked different, more desperate. "Please," a man with hollow cheeks mouthed, his expression twisted with sorrow. "You must listen." "No," I whispered. I couldn't be pulled in again. I wanted to run, but curiosity kept me rooted to the spot. I noticed a small door behind the television, slightly ajar. It was hard to tell, but it looked like it might lead to a storage area. My instinct urged me toward it. I glanced back at the television screen once more. A woman was now visibly crying, her lip trembling as she silently begged for help. The shadows that had chased me before now seemed to converge at the edges of my vision, trickling like ink across the floor. I was on borrowed time. With a fierce determination, I pushed through the door and found myself in a cramped, dimly lit storage room. Boxes were piled high against the walls, and a faint smell of mildew hung in the air. I could hear the thrum of machines from somewhere far away. Despair threatened to sink its teeth into me, but I focused on the task at hand. "Records. Records," I muttered under my breath as I rifled through the stacks. My hands trembled as I pulled open old binders, not wanting to waste a second longer. Most were dusty and faded, their contents unreadable. I felt frantic. That was when I stumbled upon a small, unmarked file tucked in the back of a box. I pulled it out, heart racing. As I opened it, I was immediately struck by the details, a list of names. Alongside them were dates and notes that sent chills down my spine. Why? I gasped, feeling the weight of the paper in my hands. These weren't just records, they were tales of people who had suffered, some dated years back, others more recent. Then I heard it, a low growl rumbling through the room. The shadows from the hallway seeped in, larger and more menacing than before. They twisted and turned, forming into something that fought against the light of the dim bulbs above. "Who's there?" I shouted, panic shooting through me. My grip tightened on the file, but there was no escape. The growl grew louder and I backed against the wall, the reality of my situation crashing over me like a wave. I had to uncover the truth, but at what cost? I knew I was running out of time. Something in the room moved unexpectedly. I stiffened, my heart dropping at the sight before me. Before I could fully process what I was seeing, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, its limbs elongated and angular, like it had been stretched in impossible ways. A sickly yellow light flickered above it, casting a ghostly glow that made every feature sharper and more horrifying. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a stack of boxes. I was trapped between a wall and this, a thing, the broken light above flickering as if struggling to stay lit. My heart raced. I had to get out. But there was nowhere to go. The only door was behind me, and the figure stepped forward. Its face was obscured, but I could feel its gaze boring into me. It felt like it knew my fears, my doubts. The growl morphed into an unsettling chuckle echoing against the cramped space. "Show me the truth," it hissed. Its voice was raspy, like the crumbling pages of the records I had just sifted through. For a moment I was frozen. A flood of emotions hit me, fear, uncertainty, anger. Why would it want the truth? I couldn't let it intimidate me. I took a deep breath and lifted the file high, holding it out like a shield. "Stay back," I shouted. "I know what you've done." The figure halted, tilting its head as though my words intrigued it. I felt ridiculous. How could a screaming file intimidate this wretched thing? But part of me was starting to believe I could reach some understanding. Then I noticed movement behind the figure. More shadows were weaving in and out, drawing closer. They swirled like water, pooling together to create forms I couldn't quite make out. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I was rooted in place, caught in this bizarre moment where terror clashed with curiosity. "Names," I demanded, glancing at the file again. "These names. Who are they?" The thing stepped closer, shaking its head slowly. "They are you," it rasped. My blood ran cold. "They are the past. You must listen to their stories." Just then I felt a rush of air behind me, and the door I had come through slammed shut. Panic surged inside me. I turned back to the figure. "What do you want from me?" With that, the shadows began to swirl faster, pulling me towards them. I tried to fight it, but it felt like quicksand. I could see the faces from the television now emerging from the darkness. Faces twisted in pain and anguish. Their mouths moved in silent screams. "Help us," they called, the whispers echoing in my mind. I felt the pull of their stories tugging at me, overwhelming my senses. Instinctively, I clutched the file tighter, feeling its edges digging into my skin. I was losing my grip on reality. I had to escape this madness. At the last moment, fueled by fear and desperation, I darted for the door. I slammed into it, banging my hands against it repeatedly. "Let me out!" I screamed, the shadows closing in around me. Then, just like that, everything went black. The light flickered one last time before plunging me into total darkness. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe. My heart pounded like a drum, echoing in the void. Then I heard a whisper, chilling and faint, threading through the silence. "The truth will find you." With those words hanging in the air, I felt gravity pulling me down deeper into the darkness. A terrifying realization settled in. This wasn't over. The truth I had sought was lurking just beyond reach, waiting to be uncovered. I needed to get back to the surface before it was too late. I came to with a start, gasping for air in a dimly lit room. The walls were cracked and peeling with the relentless buzz of fluorescent lights above me. My body felt heavy, like lead, but I forced myself up. Disoriented, I pushed through the haze. The last thing I remembered was the darkness, so I wasn't sure how I'd ended up here. I was still in the hospital. At least, that much was clear. I glanced around the small room, noting the empty beds and a faint smell of antiseptic. Something was wrong, far beyond the terrifying encounter I'd just had. I fumbled for my phone, but it wasn't in my pocket. Panic flared as I stood up, the cold floor sending a shiver through my bones. Then it hit me. Footsteps echoed in the hall outside, slow and deliberate. I held my breath, straining to catch the conversation. It sounded like multiple voices, murmuring back and forth, but I couldn't make out the words. Curiosity battled with caution as I crept toward the door, pressing my ear against it. "They'll come for you soon," one voice said, low and familiar, as if it belonged to someone I knew. My heart raced. Who were they talking about? Before I could process it, the door flew open. A figure filled the doorway. A nurse, her face pale and eyes wide. She looked at me as if I were a ghost. "What are you doing? You need to get back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Back where?" I asked, the dread pooling in my stomach. "What's going on?" She glanced over her shoulder, her breath quickening. "They're coming. You have to hide." Just then, the footsteps turned into heavy thuds. My heart dropped. I didn't want to stay here anymore. I stepped forward, but she grabbed my arm. "Trust me. Follow me," she insisted. Panic coursed through me as I nodded. I had no choice. As we slipped past her office, I caught a glimpse of a large, shadowy figure at the end of the hall moving toward us. My instincts screamed to run, but I was frozen in place for just a moment. "What is that?" I whispered. She pulled me harder, leading me down a narrow staircase. The air grew colder as we descended, the lights flickering again. My mind raced with questions, but it felt like I was losing time. Finally, we reached a basement door, and she shoved it open. "In here," she urged, a hint of desperation punctuating her tone. I hesitated, my eyes darting back to the stairs as a loud crash echoed above us. "What's chasing us? What's going on?" She stepped inside, motioning for me to follow. "You'll understand everything soon, but first, we have to stay safe." As I stepped into the small room, her fear was palpable. I swallowed hard, dread rising like bile. My instincts told me this wasn't the end. It felt like a door opening to another layer of this twisted reality. Just then, I heard that chilling whisper again, echoing through the room. "The truth will find you." Instinctively, I turned to the nurse, but she was gone. I found myself alone in a room with no exit, staring at the door where the sound had come from. It wasn't just a chilling phrase. It was a warning I couldn't shake. The darkness crept closer, and I felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. I had to uncover the truth, but how? And what would I find when I did? The room was small and cramped, dimly lit by a single fluorescent bulb that flickered intermittently. I felt a knot tighten in my chest as silence stretched out, wrapping around me like a cold cloak. Was I truly alone? Voices and echoes from the hallway seemed to laugh at my isolation, reinforcing the walls that closed in around me. I took a step toward the door, clenching my fists. If the nurse was telling the truth, staying put could be fatal. But where could I run? The basement felt like a trap, a dark pit with no way out. I hesitated, recalling the chaos just moments ago. The nurse had seemed terrified, and that fear was contagious. "No one is coming for you," I whispered to myself, trying to gather my thoughts. "You have to figure this out." Taking a deep breath, I scanned the room, searching for anything that could help, anything to shed light on my situation. A heavy wooden crate caught my eye in the corner, slightly ajar. I crept over and peered inside. It was filled with dusty medical supplies, old syringes, bandages, and a couple of worn-out journals. I picked one up and flipped it open, the pages brittle under my fingers. Medical notes, the scrawlings of a doctor or a nurse. I skimmed through the entries, my heartbeat quickening. They documented strange occurrences in the hospital, unexplained phenomena, and cases that never seemed to get better. I felt a chill wash over me as I read about patients disappearing, sometimes even from their beds, sometimes in broad daylight. Then I saw a sketch on the last page. It depicted a creature. My breath caught. It was a twisting, shadowy figure, with hollow eyes and elongated limbs. It was the same figure I had glimpsed earlier in the hallway. My mind raced with grim possibilities. How could this be real? Were people really disappearing? And was that thing the cause? Suddenly a loud bang echoed from the stairs I'd just come down. I froze, adrenaline flooding my system. The door rattled violently as if something was trying to get in. "No!" I gasped, pressing my back against the wall. My heart pounded, drowning out everything else. The noise stopped abruptly, only to be replaced by a chilling silence. I held my breath, waiting. Then whispers emerged from the darkness beyond the door. "Find her. She's the key. Before they take her." Before I could register the implications, I heard a soft thud behind me. I spun around just in time to find the crate I'd been examining tipping over, spilling the contents onto the floor. A syringe rolled away, skittering to a stop at my foot. I felt a surge of panic as I crouched to pick it up, but something caught my eye. Tucked beneath the crate was a key. I blinked hard, trying to make sense of my discovery. Who had hidden it there, and what did it unlock? Just when I felt a glimmer of hope, the whispers intensified, rising to a fever pitch. "You have to leave. They are coming." A voice sliced through the tension, clear and sharp. It wasn't the nurse. It was a man's voice, urgent and demanding. Suddenly the door splintered as a shadow pushed against it from the other side. Without thinking, I clutched the key tightly in my hand. I was running out of time. That's when I saw it. The faint outline of a door on the opposite wall, half hidden in the shadows. I moved toward it, my heart racing with fear and anticipation. With every step, the whispers grew louder, more frantic. I had to escape before whatever was prowling outside broke in and found me. Behind me, the door finally gave way, crashing open. The figure loomed in the doorway, but I didn't look back. I just prayed I wasn't too late. I yanked open the hidden door and darted inside, slamming it shut behind me. The immediate darkness was suffocating, enveloping me in an eerily thick silence that felt alive. My chest heaved as I pressed my back against the door, trying to catch my breath. I could hear the muffled sounds of chaos from the other side. Footsteps, whispers, and a low growl vibrating through the air. The room I had stepped into was small, much like a utility closet. Shadows flickered in the corners as if the darkness had a mind of its own. I felt around, my hands grazing cold metallic equipment that I couldn't quite identify in the gloom. It was stifling, yet I knew there was no time to linger. After a few moments of stillness, I resolved to take a breath and focus. The key remained clutched tightly in my palm, the only tangible link to whatever door it unlocked. I felt an alien urgency surge within me, as if forces beyond my understanding were beckoning me to discover the truth. I took stock of my surroundings. There was no window, but I could see faint outlines of more equipment and shelves. Pushing through the discomfort, I focused on the wallpaper, peeling and stained, which hinted at a history I needed to uncover. If I was going to make sense of this nightmare, I had to find a way out. My fingers brushed against a rough edge. It was a small drawer underneath an old desk. I pulled it open, the hinges creaking in protest, and inside lay more notes, some papers crumpled and yellowed with age. My heart raced as I skimmed through them. They were patient files, testimonies from nurses who had witnessed strange things happening on this floor. "Here," one noted, "I saw him again last night, moving between the beds, whispering their names. They stare as if in a trance." Another read, "We don't know what we're dealing with. Many refuse to believe, but it has touched our lives irreversibly." Chills crawled up my spine. My instincts were right. Something sinister dwelled here, and whatever it was hungry for the anguish, feeding off the fears and the stories these people carried. Before I could process it any further, I heard commotion just beyond the door. The creature was trying to break through, the sound of its warped body cracking against the heavy wood. I realized I was out of time. With newfound resolve, I turned back toward the door, the key glinting in the dim light. I tried it in the small lock, but it didn't fit. Panic rose again, but I forced myself to breathe, quickly scanning the area for another exit. Eyes darting, I caught sight of a panel above the headboard of the desk. With urgency pushing me forward, I jumped and grasped it. It was clunky and rusted, but yielded under my weight. As the panel popped open, I saw a narrow tunnel leading to the unknown. It looked cramped and uninviting, but I knew I had to go. Footsteps erupted beyond the door, and I couldn't wait any longer. I squeezed through the opening, inching into the darkness, feeling the walls close around me. The tunnel's damp air felt like a memory from an old horror movie, heavy with the scent of decay. I crawled desperately, every sound behind me amplified, growing closer, echoing down the lengths of the corridor I had just fled. Minutes felt like hours as I navigated the dark passage. My lungs burned, yet I pushed onward, driven by primal fear. That's when I heard it. The whispers again, rising and falling all around me. Help us, Clara. Find the truth, Clara. Each name rang out, haunting, desperate, full of life lost. Could this be the truth? I thought. Another whisper resonating within the dark recesses of my mind. My hands clawed at the raw edges of the tunnel, but just as I started to lose hope, I saw a light piercing through the darkness ahead. When I finally emerged, I found myself in a dusty old room, cluttered boxes and old furniture strewn about. The rays of moonlight filtering through the cracked window illuminated a path. I stumbled toward it, calling on all my remaining energy. As I approached the light, I glanced back, half expecting to see the creature lurking. Instead, I saw fragments of figures standing in the shadows, faces I now recognized from the journals. There was Lily, the child, and others, their eyes filled with urgency. They were trapped, tied to this place. "Don't leave us," Lily whispered desperately, the others echoing her sentiment, their features flickering in and out of existence. The realization crashed down on me. This wasn't just about me escaping. I had to help them too. I took a deep breath, adrenaline pumping through my veins, fighting against the tendrils of fear. "I will find a way," I whispered, promising them my resolve. But as I turned to run into the light, the air shifted. The room around me twisted and undulated, shadows crawling across the floor. I was painfully aware that the nightmare was far from over, and the truth I had uncovered only hinted at deeper horrors still waiting in the darkness. I moved toward the door on trembling legs, heart pounding and filled with questions. Was I untethered from the world outside, or had I just stepped into a reality even darker than before? I'd escaped one nightmare, but I feared there were countless more yet to come, and as I stepped back into the hallway, I knew that the hunt for answers, and for the lost souls, was just beginning. What awaited me was unclear, but one thing was certain. I couldn't turn back now.